Good morning. My name is Marianne Bogle. I'm the Executive Director of CSR Sweden and also a board member of CSR Europe. Since I'm a board member of CSR Europe, I've been in Brussels a couple of times, and I think I have had the pleasure to meet some of you in the organization Golden Bee and WTO. I wish that we could been there with you today, but I think this may be more of an environmental friendly way to talk to you. And I wish that maybe in 2015 that we can come and visit you in China. I'm here today with my colleague Ola Löhman, who's also working for CSR Sweden and is a director who helping companies implement this knowledge that they need to have around reporting. And I will start with some hard facts, and then I will give some questions to Ola to elaborate around the directive. So, the directive, it was published in the European Office Journal on the 15th of November. This means that the 5th of December, this directive will enter into force. This date of 5th December is the start for counting to the deadline of 24 months, which member states have to transpose the directive into national legislation. So latest by 5th of December 2016. So companies falling under the scope of this directive have to report in 2018 on their non-financial information policies and results of 2017. So practically it means that these companies have just 2 years to prepare themselves to bring change in their reporting culture. And now I will ask you, Ola, what does this mean in practice?
Well, in practice, it actually means that corporations that falls under directive has to understand how they actually will internalize what usually was called externalities, which are environmental, social issues and bribery and corruption, and also how they use diversity. All of those are normally things that we used to not think that is business as normal. And that is part of the CSR agenda to do so, but it has never been sort of legislated that you have to actually implement them into your organization. And the big revolution here is that corporates are actually being asked to tell the world how they implement it and with what results they implement it, which financial consequences, which means that it goes from being sort of an external thing that people are being perceived earlier, talking about brands and stuff like that, to become some sort of internal management process where corporations actually need to understand how these things work and how it develops into financial results for the corporations, which is actually a revolution. As I said, we've been talking about earlier, it's sort of 150 years of financial and economical theories that sort of goes down the drain, and all of a sudden a new world emerges. And here you have the reason why it takes some years to implement this.
So company hasn't been doing this before. This is something really new.
Yes, very few companies do this. Most of what is called financial materiality of corporate social responsibility and sustainability has been perceived from the perspective of how companies are being perceived by its sort of surrounding the outside world, what we call stakeholders, like customers, employees and people like that, who actually are not inside the companies, and employees are actually hired from outside. They're not inside the corporation. So those are external. And how they perceive the corporation and how they feel about it has been the sort of idea. But that is not what the directive says. It says that you are going to, as a company, actually tell the world how you actually make that into, how that transforms into money, how that transforms into financial results. And how you are going to do this is that you are going to define these areas, which is environmental, and there is also diversity, and there are social and economical issues. Those are briberies and corruption and human rights issues, which is all sort of societal to corporations, and how you actually deal with them in a way that transforms into money, and how that process actually works. And the really the big change is that it is in the management report.
So they really have to internalize this
Exactly.
knowledge, and that is what you helping the companies
Yes.
with.
So
Yes.
what is the thing is that you need to, as a corporate, as a management, because they make management also collectively responsible for this.
Mhm.
So the directive actually says it's not the CEO, it's the management who is actually collectively responsible for doing this, which means that corporations and their management are sort of responsible for showing in their management report and tell the story on how these, what used to be external forces and external effects, now becomes internalized, and also how they sort of make financial sense to the corporation. And there's also an add-on, because I mean some companies may come up with the fact that it isn't financially viable for them to do so, and that is sort of fine. And then they should tell that story. Then they shall be very clear on how it not becomes financially viable. And that is called the comply and explain thing. If you don't do this in your financial reports, you are going to have to explain why you don't
Yes.
do it. So in any case, whichever way this goes, corporations are going to have to understand the financial consequences of external effects. And that is a revolution. Because if you take all of the others, the sort of reporting initiatives that have been before, very often materiality is defined, as we mentioned, as how companies are being perceived. Now it's being changed into what they actually produce.
Yes.
So it's internalized, and this is sort of as I said, this is a revolution. It's a new thing.
And what I can hear you say, it's going to be a change, and it's going to be quite much work. But what kind of values can a company see in this?
To begin with, it doesn't really matter what value it can see in it, because they're going to be forced to do it.
Yes.
So I mean, whether
Yes.
it's valuable or not is sort of
Yes.
beside the point, actually.
Yes.
But so from that perspective, you can say it's not a value-driven process for the company, but it's a value-driven process for shareholders, because shareholders need to understand what actual consequences there is in their investments. And a lot of other groups around the company needs to understand what actually values and costs are being produced here, and how they shall actually act on that information. And for a corporation to not do this, they're doing illegal stuff. So I mean, for them, the value is sort of obvious. They're forced to do this. And one of the reasons I do believe that the Commission has made this into a directive that is going to be transformed into law, is because they haven't really seen that the change in corporation which you would have had expected. So the change, the corporations has not really changed in the same way as the world has done. So they're still left behind in that sense, and not because they're evil, but because the system hasn't really allowed it. And it has been more profitable to actually work on brands and perception than it is on performance. So therefore now they're changing that. So they make sort of a level playing field for everybody.
Yes.
But that also creates a situation where we know that corporations generally don't have the real competencies to do this. And that has been sort of researched by CSR Europe and CSR Sweden. So it's researched and clear that we know that management generally don't know how to do this. We know that. And they don't know that because they're bad people. They just don't know it. So it's not as very often you see CSR and sustainability in corporations being transformed into sort of being good or bad. This is not being good or bad. This is doing sort of being financially reasonable.
Yes.
That's what it is. Which creates we need new knowledge, we need new things. So the directive in that sense is very important.
When I hear you talking, I hear you, it's very much around internalize new knowledge, new competence, and I think that there's some new training. And where can they find this new knowledge? It's in the business schools?
Well, this is one of the major problems, because what we're now doing, that we are entering the future, so to speak. We are creating the future. And from an academic point of view and the research point of view, in that sense, the academic world needs to have knowledge, which is always in the past. So if we talk about knowledge in the sense, can you actually prove that these things work? Knowledge tells us, no, they don't. They don't sort of add up to financial results. But that doesn't mean that economics and financials actually can be social and adapt to financial results, because these are social sciences. They change if the world changes,
Yes.
and the world has changed. So therefore we need to create new knowledge, and as we know from experience, the training that we provide is actually more into understanding the prerequisites for doing this. And so what we need to do here is learn there needs to become new training sessions for companies to deal with this. And sadly to say, the traditional universities don't provide that, and that's one of the reasons that we've created the institute and that why we deal with it. And they're also it's also the experience we have.
Yes.
From done this in pilot sessions, that corporations actually don't really have the knowledge, but they are very interested in understanding it. And more corporations also acknowledge the fact that they don't have the knowledge and need to bring it on and develop it, which is a very positive development.
Yes.
So it's a sort of a humble way of taking these complex issues on.
So we have now 2 years to do a lot of training.
Yes.
And
which is a very short time.
And I wish the both of us the best of luck to do that.
We could do with that, yes.
Thank you.
So, and we should also say that a lot of corporations are very interested in this, and they also need a lot of luck.
Yes.
In this, because this is going to be a very
best of luck to.
It's going to be a complicated sort of development. But I mean, in 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years, if you look at this in 10 years' time, everybody would say, we've always done this. This is not complicated. It's just a transition, and that transition is hard. But now it's going to be forced on corporations, so it's going to happen. But they're going to change, and everything's going to be okay. This is not rocket science. It's actually financials and economics, very rational stuff. Yes. So it's just new prerequisites, and it's going to work. We've done this. We know that it works.
Yes.
So that's it.
Thank you so much, and I hope that we can meet in person maybe in 2015. Thank you.
Thank you.